Tonight on the Late Debate. In the week, a Tory donor reportedly said Diane Abbott should be shot. The government unveils its new definition of extremism.
As the Prime Minister has said, the time has come for us all to stand together, to combat the forces of division and to beat this poison.
After a lifelong career as an MP, Harriet Harman reveals what's next after 4 decades in the Commons.
I want to step aside to make way for the new generation of incredibly able, committed and energetic people who are coming in to be Labour MPs.
Whatever happened to Sadiq Khan's Drugs Commission to look at legalising cannabis?
Personally, I don't think legalisation would be progress. I think we would need, for example, to have a lot more psychiatrists to deal with the consequences.
And was London shortchanged by Jeremy Hunt's budget? Good evening and welcome to the Late Debate. Just days after a Tory donor reportedly said Diane Abbott should be shot, the government gave us a new definition of extremism. The aim is to stop hate spreading through society, but critics claim it's little more than political point scoring, which could stifle free speech. In a moment, I'll discuss that further with tonight's panel of Labour, Conservative and Liberal Democrat MPs. But first, no matter what happens between now and the general election, one thing's for certain. Dozens of MPs are standing down, many from seats here in London. Among them is Harriet Harman, a Labour MP with a career spanning more than 4 decades. She told me why it was the right time to go and has mixed feelings about life at Westminster for female politicians.
Well, it's better in some ways and worse in others. And as you say, when I was first elected in 1982, there was only 3% women MPs, so we were very much a marginalised minority. It was basically a men-only parliament at that point. And now there's 35% women MPs. So we're a critical mass, albeit still outnumbered. And the thing about being on the margins is that people could just ignore you and pretend you weren't there. But because there's a critical mass now of women who are more confident, who are authoritative, determined to have their voice heard, that means that it's triggered quite a lot of backlash and misogyny. And that, combined with social media, means there's a lot of threat and challenge and obstruction of women, which makes it harder to do the job.
What's your proudest moment?
Well, I think every moment of being an MP, actually, every day is a proud day, so long as you're not making an absolute mess of things. But I think that I was very pleased to be part, with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, of getting Labour out of opposition, which we'd been in since 1979, into government in 1997. And I suppose in government, one of my proudest moments is getting the Equality Act through.
When you joined that Blair government, you were one of those women MPs famously labelled Blair babes. How did that sit with you? Well,
it was ridiculous, bearing in mind this was a very tough group of women breaking into the House of Commons in 1997. To be called babes was quite, it was insulting in a way. I think we should have owned it, actually, and just turned it round on itself. But after 100 days of being in government, we felt that we had to produce a report as women MPs to say, this is the difference that women MPs have made even within the first 100 days. So we felt we had to keep justifying ourselves, and really we were entitled to be there.
Last year you chaired the Privileges Committee, which found Boris Johnson had misled Parliament. What do you make of the suggestions he's going to play a prominent role in the Conservative election campaign?
We can only do our job as MPs if ministers tell us the truth. If they pull the wool over our eyes, then there's no effective scrutiny, there's no accountability, and we might as well not be there. So telling the truth to Parliament and being open with Parliament, that is absolutely crucial. And Boris Johnson did not do that. And when he was challenged on that, instead of apologising and saying, yes, I did mislead Parliament, but actually these were the reasons I did it and I now regret it, he just denied it.
He resigned his seat in Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Has he paid his penalty? Is there any barrier to him standing again?
Well, There is no barrier in the rules to him standing again, but there's a concept in contempt of Parliament, and what the committee did was find that he'd committed contempt of Parliament. There's a concept of purging your contempt, and that is if you say, I recognise what I've done, and what I've done was wrong, and I'm going to change my ways. Boris Johnson hasn't shown no signs of that.
You think if he stands again, he still needs to apologise?
Well, I'm not going to do any commentary on it, but the fact is he hasn't apologised. He's never accepted that it was evident that he had told lies to Parliament, and he's still trying to present things as they weren't.
Are you surprised you spent 42 years in Parliament as a Labour MP and never seen a woman Labour leader?
Well, I think surprised is probably too neutral a word for it. I'm disappointed, annoyed, perplexed. But I hope we won't have a leadership election for a good long time, because I hope Keir Starmer will be Prime Minister and stay Prime Minister. But next time, I hope there will be a woman Labour leader.
Diane Abbott has been on the receiving end of more abuse this week. Have you spoken to her?
I've messaged her, but I haven't heard back from her. But I think that this is just a tiny tip of the iceberg of the misogynist and racist abuse that she has received over the years.
Do you think she deserves to have the Labour whip restored?
Well, I support the complaints procedures that there are in the Labour Party, and I never want to second guess the people who are actually doing the complaints investigation and deliberation. And I very strongly support Keir Starmer's drive against anti-Semitism. Having said that, I wouldn't like to see the end of Diane Abbott in Parliament after her long career in Parliament, her leaving without being back in the Parliamentary Labour Party. So I hope the situation can be resolved.
It's 2 years since your husband Jack died, and I think you spoke of saying there should be a handbook for widows. You don't want to write it, but what do you think should be in it?
The whole ideology of feminism, now my generation of feminists are entering into widowhood, and we're going to need to redefine that, because it can't be that if you've got 30 years of your life left, that those years are unimportant and regarded as worthless because your husband has died. I think we've got to reshape the notion of widowhood. It's for many women decades long, perhaps a third of their life, and therefore we have to not see it as a wasted time, just marking time until we too die, but actually we've got to see a new way of reinventing widowhood to be more a productive and valuable period.
Did you think about staying on?
I had planned to go earlier, but the party under Jeremy Corbyn was in such a vulnerable, perilous and fragile state. I didn't feel it would be right to leave at that point. The party is now very stable. I have done more than 40 years. That is more than enough years. And also, I want to step aside to make way for the new generation of incredibly able, committed and energetic people who are coming in to be Labour MPs, not least my successor in Camberwell and Peckham.
Would you go to the Lords if offered?
Yes, I would definitely like to go to the Lords.
If you were to go to the House of Lords, have you got it in you still to be a minister again?
I think one of the thing about our team in the House of Lords is they've been a really experienced and effective force for stability. So I think they've got plenty of them already experienced in the Lords there who can step up and be ministers. But, you know, never say never.
If Sir Keir Starmer called upon you as Baroness Harman to be a government minister, you'd say yes?
I don't think he's going to need me because they've got a lot of able people. But as I say never.
Harriet Harman speaking to me earlier. Back now to deciding what is an extremist. The government came up with its definition today to crack down, it says, on those who promote violence and intolerance. So should that include a Tory party donor who called for a black MP to be shot? Joining me to discuss that is the Labour MP for Hornsey and Wood Green and Shadow Minister for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, Catherine West. For the Conservatives, Romford MP Andrew Rossendale. And for the Liberal Democrats, Twickenham MP Munira Wilson. Welcome, all of you. Munira, do we need a definition of extremism?
Look, we've seen a real uptick in hate crimes of late. We've seen a huge rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. So it's right that we come together and bring communities together to tackle those tensions and call out those hate crimes. I am concerned, however, about the announcements we've heard today, not least because This definition has been rushed out, it's not been consulted on, it's not bringing communities together, and most of all, the government is giving itself a lot of powers to just list organisations that fall under this definition with no right of appeal. It feels very, very authoritarian to me. So I think we need to be really careful about protecting our freedom of speech, our freedom of protest, whilst also making sure that we're
Andrew, is it a
tackling
curb on
hate.
free speech?
Well, I'm concerned that we don't start doing things which will stop free speech. That's bedrock of our society: freedom of speech, freedom of religion. A rule of law is what really matters. But I understand why the government's doing this. There are appalling examples of hatred and extremist behaviour, and of course we should unite together to stop that and clamp down on that kind of activity.
Does Labour think it goes far enough?
Well, I think your original question was about Diane Abbott and the abuse that she's had from, you could argue, an extremist way of speaking. But I think giving back the 10 million is what the Conservatives really should do, because in a way, why would you take money from a racist? But on the extremism point, I think we need to wait to see what comes back from the consultation and the national debate. Because if my borough is anything to go by, where we have our synagogues, our churches, our mosques all together, working together for a safer community, safer neighbourhoods, that's really what works on the ground, and engaging with young people. It's very important in the current climate where so many people have their information from their phones, that we work face to face with youngsters.
Do you think, Andrew, that your party should give back the £10 million?
Look, I don't want to go into who gives what money to which party and the background of each person, but of course there should be careful checks as to who any party is taking money from. The key point here, though, is that we have to unite against people that spread hatred, whoever they are, whatever their political views or whatever their religion might be. And certainly in my borough, in Havering, we do that. We all work together, all religions and people from different political parties, to clamp down on that kind of behaviour. It's not tolerated. It shouldn't be tolerated anywhere.
But Frank Hester has called for a black MP to be shot. He's also made rude and racist remarks about the Indian community as well. And yet this man has not just given £10 million, where we found out today that apparently there's another £5 million in the pipeline. Surely, under your government's own extremism definition published today, he falls foul of that and therefore should be paying it back, as Liberal Democrat Deputy Leader Daisy Cooper has written to your party chair to call for.
Catherine, it's not just Rishi Sunak facing difficult questions, Sir Keir Starmer too. As we heard from Harriet Harman, she would like to see Diane Abbott back in the party. Would you?
Well, this is all an independent complaints process, and I think anyone who's in a workplace will say it's not for a colleague to say what should happen to another colleague. But, you know, to me, she's a national icon, and I would like to see that the complaint which has been held against her is dealt with swiftly, and that it comes to a conclusion as swiftly as possible.
Andrew, do you have some sympathy with Diane Abbott? She's waited 11 months for the outcome of this inquiry. You've just spent 2 years, I think, waiting for the outcome of a police investigation. There was no case against you, but that was an awful long time to wait. You probably have some sympathy with Diane Abbott, don't you?
Look, I believe in free speech, and I like political parties to have a multitude of people with different views. I disagree with Jeremy Corbyn on almost everything, but I think he's an honourable man, and he spoke up on things that he truly believed in. I disagree with it. Same with Diane Abbott. I know her very well. I know Jeremy very well. I don't really understand why in today's political parties, people with those types of views can't be accommodated. So, you know, it's up to Catherine really to do something about that, because I think parties are broad churches. Now, there has to be good behaviour. There can't be horrible hatred statements that offend people. Of course there can't. But I do believe that we've got to be very careful about pushing people away purely because they have different views to ourselves.
You haven't really spoken about your 2 years in limbo. You must be glad to be back.
Look, it could happen to anyone. It's a great pity, but I'm very pleased to be back. I've spoken in the House, I think, 17 times in the last 4 weeks, but I never stopped working for the people of Romford. I'm just glad it's over and I'm back to work as normal.
OK. Now, a commission set up by Sadiq Khan to examine the impact of drugs on people's lives has been put on the back burner. In 2022, the mayor was in a cannabis factory in California when he announced a panel to look at whether it should be legalised here. But it seems it's no longer a priority.
Unfortunately, because of other issues that we've had to deal with, that's been left on the back burner and stuff. We simply haven't had the bandwidth to deal with the work of the London Drug Commission. It's still there doing its work, but it's not been a priority.
The Mayor's announcement comes as a disappointment to campaigners, including the mother of teenager Daniel Spargo-Mabs, who died after taking drugs at an illegal rave. She said the Mayor should pay more attention to the lives being ruined.
Tackling the issue of the harm that drugs are causing to individuals and communities within London really should be a priority for the Mayor. And if to the extent to which the Commission is going to be looking at that as broadly as it needs to be, that would be a really positive thing. And I think it should be taken off the back burner.
Personally, I don't think legalisation would be progress. I think we would need, for example, to have a lot more psychiatrists to deal with the consequences. We would have more traffic accidents. We would have more children overdosing on cannabis that looks like sweeties coming into a accident and emergency units.
Catherine, legalising cannabis has never been official Labour Party policy. Quite convenient for Sadiq Khan to have it on the back burner just before his re-election.
Well, I think it was always quite exploratory in terms of the reference of the Commission, but Keir Starmer has definitely said that the next term has to be on delivering more homes, more bobbies on the beat, sorting out educational opportunities for youngsters, looking at the cost of living crisis, and all these things require a lot of action. So we haven't really got time to sit round and have a long debate about...
As Sadiq said, you haven't got the bandwidth.
That's right.
Munira, your candidate in the mayoral election, Rob Blackie, has said the police are wasting too much time doing stop and search on people for cannabis.
Well, Rob's making a point that he wants to see the Metropolitan Police focusing particularly on violent crime, crime against women and girls. And also we know that the Met has got a much lower rate compared to other forces on things like burglaries and theft, which are the sorts of things that my constituents are constantly writing to me about. So what he's pressed for is for information on how much time the police is spending on cannabis-related activity.
Where do the Lib Dems stand on legalising cannabis?
Well, we've long said that the outdated laws that we have are actually failing many of our young people, as we heard in the VT from Fiona, and that we should have a highly regulated approach to cannabis. But ultimately, coming back to Rob's point and the Mayor and the Met Police, what we've seen is a cut of 500 police community support officers since 2015 by the Conservative government, which is why we need to spend police time on the issues that matter to Londoners, like violent crime, burglary and theft.
Andrew, isn't smoking cannabis just a fact of life in London now?
Why is Sadiq Khan getting involved with something that he has no power to change? I'm not aware the Mayor of London has power to change the law on drugs. Drugs destroy lives, they ruin communities, they harm young people, as we've seen earlier from that example. I don't believe we should be encouraging young people to take drugs, and having this commission is almost like trying to legitimise it. So I'm glad it's on the back burner, but I do worry about London under Mr. Khan. We don't want to become another Amsterdam. We want a family-friendly city, and having drugs in a free-for-all situation is not something that I would ever want to see for London.
OK, let's talk about the budget. Thin pickings for Londoners?
Yes, I feel that the housing crisis didn't get much sort of bandwidth, for want of a better word. Whether it's the general picture of the economy and the over 5% borrowing rate for first-time buyers, which we know really punishes Londoners because of the enormous amounts that you have to come up with as a nominal. No sort of idea about how the rental crisis might be tackled, the Section 21. No idea when that might come forward, when it might be funded in terms of an idea that the government could implement. And, of course, nothing really on capital for social housing.
Also nothing in the way of capital spending on big transport projects. London's always had a project on the go. After the Silvertown Tunnel, there seems to be nothing in the pipeline. Are you disappointed, Andrew?
Oh yes, very disappointed. I've tried for many years to get the Gallows Corner junction reconstructed. That's on the A12, A127, where there's quite a dangerous flyover, which was meant to be temporary in the early 70s. So we're not getting the investment we need. But look, the country is very short of cash after the pandemic. Those lockdowns, there was a cost to them. So the country, whoever's in power, does not have all the money to spend that we would normally have to spend. But the real problem for my borough in Havering is what the Mayor of London takes out of boroughs like Havering and spends it in central London. We're being fleeced by the Mayor of London. If we could change that system, we'd get more money for places like Romford.
Relative to what Kwasi Kwarteng did in his 55 days as the Chancellor, the Mayor of London has got tiny tax-raising powers. Kwasi and Liz broke the economy and we're all paying the price.
Munira, what would you have liked to have seen in the budget?
Well, I'm the Liberal Democrats education spokesperson. I'm in and out of schools in my constituency most weeks, and I know they're having to make heartbreaking choices at the moment, and they're all setting deficit budgets, and children are missing out. We're losing teaching staff. The parents are having to pay for the basics at the moment. School trips are being cut. Our children are missing out. I would love to have seen something to boost our schools, because at the end of the day, our children are our future, and if we don't invest in their education, we're frankly not investing in our long-term economy.
It doesn't seem to have done much to shift the opinion polls. You must be worried, Andrew?
I think that obviously politics is in a state of flux at the moment. What I am finding is that whilst people are very disappointed in the Conservatives, of course people are disgruntled about a whole range of things, they're not very keen on Labour either. It's not like there's a Tony Blair-style swing to Labour. So I think in the Greater London area, I think you're going to see some surprising results, and Uxbridge was a foretaste of that in the by-election of last year. I certainly think that in Romford, I can't see many people switching to the Labour Party.
Catherine, the truth is that even if Labour is elected at the next general election, Rachel Reeves is going to have no more money to throw at London than Jeremy Hunt has.
Well, of course, I just have to pick up, Andrew, that Uxbridge was a 10% swing to Labour. Yes, we just were pipped
But
at
you
the
didn't
post.
win it.
No, but a 10% swing across London would be pretty good, but I'm not complacent. And I think it's really important that we work for every single vote in the next general election. And yes, Rachel Reeves is going to have a lot of headaches because, as I said before, Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng, they broke the country's economy and we are all paying the price.
We heard from Andrew, what I guess is going to be a major theme of the Conservative campaign, that the real reason there's no money is the money spent on the pandemic. There is some legitimacy to that, isn't there, Munira?
Well, obviously, there was a lot of money spent on the pandemic, but we have seen a Conservative government that, frankly, has crashed the economy and has put taxes at an all-time high, which has left the ordinary people so much worse off. But at the same time, they've also cut taxes for our big banks when we've got record waiting lists and shortages of staff in every sector of the economy. If we could tackle those NHS waiting lists, then we could get more people working.
Munira, we've just about run out of time. Can I just ask all three of you quickly, yes or no, do you think there's going to be a May election?
No.
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 Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. That's all for tonight. Thank you to my guests, Harriet Harman, Catherine West, Andrew Rossendale and Munira Wilson. We'll be back next month. Until then, good night and thank you for watching.